Now at 9, President Biden stepping aside in the race for the White House, saying he will not seek re-election. Vice President Kamala Harris ready to join the race and getting support from the president. We have night team coverage.
An unsettled pattern on the way this week. I'll let you know when to expect showers and storms.
Then an East Boston man facing a murder charge, what police say led up to a deadly stabbing in Chelsea.
And a fire at Fenway, what sparked flames at the historic ballpark during a concert.
7 News at 9 starts now.
First at 9, President Biden is dropping out of the race for the White House. The president saying he's passing the torch because it's in the best interest of the country and the Democratic Party. Biden is showing support for Vice President Kamala Harris tonight, endorsing her for the party's nomination. Harris says she's honored to receive that endorsement and promises to earn and win the Democratic nomination.
In recent weeks, Biden faced increasing calls to drop out, starting with that disastrous debate against Donald Trump. There's a lot to cover with the president's decision, from reaction to a closer look at what comes next for the Democrats. We have night team coverage. We start with the night team's Dan Housley live in the newsroom with the latest. Dan?
Well, we all knew this was possibly coming, but now we know it is here. This shakes up the race that Democrats had feared was getting worse and worse by the day for President Joe Biden, and as a result for any Democrat running this year as well. They were worried about the down ticket races, whether Biden would take them down, and that only increased the pressure, and not only trying to show him poll numbers that showed that he was in trouble, but that others would be in trouble as well if he stayed in the race. Now they're hoping this changed it. It gives them a shot on holding on to the White House, but no one knows for sure. President Biden had long decided to stay in the race despite all the pressure from those Democrats. Now the pressure was too much on him, and after he had developed COVID, it started with his bad debate performance several weeks ago, and then he was doing interviews to try to stay in the race to show that he had the vigor and the mental acuity to stay in the race, but that just didn't seem to be working. He would go into these interviews and then stumble, and it would not get better. And then last week, and the Republican convention was in full steam, the Trump team looking strong, the poll numbers looking worse. President Biden came down with COVID, and while he may get through that just fine, and it may not relate to long-term problems with his health, it still gave an image that was not great to see at a time when the Republicans were showing such strength with Donald Trump and strength with that ticket. President Biden huddled with his family and close advisors Saturday night and isolating at home with COVID in Rehoboth. Biden bowed to a tidal wave of pressure from his own party to throw in the towel in the 2024 presidential race. Biden writing that he was doing this for the country and for the Democratic Party. And at the same time, he did not make an endorsement at that moment he made that statement, but a half hour later, he endorsed Kamala Harris, saying that he had picked her for this moment. The vice president, he said, was ready to be president. It is not fully his choice, but he will be telling his delegates to go with her. And then there will be now a convention where the choice will be made, as well as a virtual roll call vote that will likely settle this issue, but we'll have to wait and see. President Joe Biden reportedly huddled with family and his closest advisors Saturday night, isolating with COVID at his home in Rehoboth. Biden bowed to a tidal wave of pressure from his own party to throw in the towel in the 2024 presidential race. Biden writing, "I believe it is in the best interests of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term."
The COVID situation sped this up, I think, to some degree, because we saw news stations showing him having a difficult time going up the ladder of Air Force One and coming down the ladder of Air Force One. So they were playing that over and over again, and it showed weakness. And on the converse side of that, we saw former President Trump have this assassination attempt raise his fist and show strength. And elections are about contrasts. And so whether it was fair or not, it wasn't getting any better.
A short time later, Biden released an endorsement of his vice president, Kamala Harris, to replace him at the top of the ticket and take up the fight against former President Donald Trump. Harris still needs to win the nomination at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago next month, with a virtual roll call vote starting in just over 2 weeks. Dozens of Democratic leaders were pushing Biden to leave the race. Most are now praising him. Former President Barack Obama, speaking fondly of his former VP, wrote, "Joe Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents, as well as a dear friend and partner to me. Today, we've also been reminded again that he's a patriot of the highest order." Notably, though, Obama did not endorse Harris or say what he thinks should happen now. Former President Trump blasted Biden and the Democrats. Biden says he will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about his decision. Live in the newsroom, Dan Housley, 7 News 19.
Kamala Harris says she's ready for the race. She's promising to work hard for Democrats and keep a hold on the White House. Many in her party feel she has the best chance of winning in November. Harris first came on the political scene 20 years ago. She won an election to become the district attorney of San Francisco in 2004. In 2011, Harris won a close race to become the Attorney General of California. She held that position until 2017 when she won her seat in the Senate. Then in 2020, she put her name in for the race for the White House. She lost that bid, but of course became Biden's vice president. Our night team coverage continues with Rob Way live in the newsroom with more on Harris. Rob?
Olivia, from the moment President Biden chose Kamala Harris as his VP, he has said she is ready to lead on day one. Now we'll see if voters agree.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear.
Vice President Kamala Harris made history back in 2021 when she was sworn in as the United States' first female vice president. Now she looks to make history again and become the country's first woman president. A veteran political strategist here in Massachusetts says the Democratic Party should unite behind her.
And I think that it's going to be a wonderful, historic thing to have the first woman who is both African American and Asian American heading the ticket.
Harris's background is unique among vice presidents. Her mother was a biologist who emigrated from India, and her father is a college professor from Jamaica. She's a native from California and graduated from Howard University in Washington, D.C. After law school, Harris worked as an attorney in a county DA's office, which led to her political career. She was elected San Francisco District Attorney in 2004 and Attorney General of California in 2011. It was during that time she met Beau Biden, President Biden's son, saying in a statement today, "We were friends from our days working together as attorneys general of our home states. As we worked together, Beau would tell me stories about his dad, the kind of father and the kind of man he was, and the qualities Beau revered in his father are the same qualities, the same values I have seen every single day in Joe's leadership as president." In 2017, Harris became a U.S. Senator. Harris was sworn in by then Vice President Biden. She then ran for president in 2020, but dropped out soon after not getting enough support. She then was picked by Biden to be his running mate.
She's tough. She's experienced. She's a proven fighter.
Her husband, Doug Emhoff, became the second gentleman of the United States, the first man to hold that title. And if she gets the nomination and wins in November, he'll become the first gentleman in American history. More recently, throughout her vice presidency, Harris has struggled to define herself. She's been juggling several difficult topics, such as voting rights and the border. The Voting Rights Act failed in Congress a couple years ago. And on the border, Harris was criticized on the right for not spending enough time there and ignoring the problem. And on the left, for telling migrants in a speech, "Do not come." This, of course, will be a major talking point from the Trump campaign, going after her on this very issue, something they've criticized Biden for during his time in office. But some who support her argue she has more to run on.
Her voice on abortion rights has been enormous, and women's health. And going against a guy who's been accused of rape, sleeping with the porno actress, and all kinds of disrespect toward women, that in and of itself is going to be very interesting to see.
But now we're hearing from former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. They released a statement saying, in part, "We are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris and will do whatever we can do to support her."
We're going to stand behind her all the way because she has the credentials.
The question now is how much more support will she get and if she's able to win the nomination. Live in the newsroom, Rob Way, 7 News Night Team.
Hunter Biden with an emotional tribute to his dad. I'm so lucky every night I get to tell him I love him and to thank him. I ask all Americans to join me tonight in doing the same. Thank you, Mr. President. I love you, Dad. That family support, key for the president tonight. Karen Caifa is at the White House. And Karen, what do we know about the timeline of the president's decision here?
Ryan, we know that this came together relatively quickly, given that this has been a drumbeat for weeks. This has been dominating the political conversation. And even as late as last Thursday, last Friday, President Biden, who's been recovering from COVID-19, said he was looking forward to getting back on the campaign trail. What we understand is that yesterday afternoon, he called two of his closest advisors to his beach home in Delaware. Last night, there was a family meeting. And this morning, that's when the ball really got rolling on solidifying these plans. He spoke with the Vice President Kamala Harris to talk about his decision and talk about his endorsement. And this decision was kept really, really close because so many around the president wanted him to make this announcement on his own terms, which of course came in the form of that letter on social media around 1:45 this afternoon, Ryan.
Curious how much notice his staff got that the end of the campaign was coming there.
Yeah, you know, there wasn't much notice at all, and some senior White House staff and campaign staff even were only notified about the announcement in the minutes before it went public on X and Facebook and elsewhere. That is how close this decision had been kept. It was a very personal decision for the president, obviously, and for someone who has been in public service this long. Those close to him wanted him to have the opportunity to say it in his own words. So the president says we will hear from him a little bit more about this decision. When that will happen is still up in the air. Of course, he is still recovering from COVID. No public events on his schedule per the official White House schedule for tomorrow. They say for Tuesday through the end of the week. More details are forthcoming, Ryan.
Karen Caifa live at the White House tonight. Thank you so much. And Vice President Harris is already gaining financial support. According to the fundraising platform Act Blue, Democrats raised more than $27 million in the first 5 hours after President Biden's announcement. And as the vice president steps into the presidential race with such strong support, speculation's beginning about who she might pick to be her running mate. The Night Team's Victoria Price in the newsroom with more on that race.
Well, Ryan, even before today's news broke, there had been speculation. There had been conversations happening behind closed doors. There was even polling about who could be Kamala Harris's running mate if and when Joe Biden dropped out of the race. With Vice President Kamala Harris likely taking the top of the Democratic ticket, the attention turns to who could be the VP's VP. Several names have already been floated as possible Harris running mates. The majority are Democratic governors from key swing states, like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Even before Biden announced he was dropping out, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu speculated on CNN that Harris might take the top spot. He said a swing state governor as a running mate would be the right move.
If Kamala were smart, she's going to pick a Democrat governor like a Shapiro or Andy Beshear, something like that. That's a new, refreshed ticket.
Former astronaut and current Arizona Senator Mark Kelly has also been mentioned, given that Arizona is a crucial battleground. Polling from earlier this month showed Democratic voters slightly favored Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg over any other potential candidate. He has already endorsed Harris for president after joining her Saturday at a Provincetown fundraiser. Now, one notable name that you may have noticed is missing from much of the VP speculation is California Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, even though Newsom is often mentioned in Democratic Party circles as a potential presidential candidate, the Constitution does not allow for both candidates on the same ticket to live in the same state. Live in the newsroom, Victoria Price, 7 News, Night Team.
Now, because of her already strong position, Republicans wasted no time taking swipes at the vice president. So was independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who spoke tonight in Hyannisport. The Night Team's Stephen Quinn is live there with more. Stephen?
President Biden's opponents certainly took no time and were quick to criticize not only President Biden's decision to step down, as he announced on Sunday, but also his decision to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris. With President Biden bowing out of the race, many Republicans say the decision means he should resign from office now. House Speaker Mike Johnson saying, quote, "If Joe Biden is not fit to run for president, he is not fit to serve as president. He must resign the office immediately." Vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance not holding back, saying of Vice President Kamala Harris, quote, "She lied for nearly 4 years about Biden's mental capacity, saddling the nation with a president who can't do the job." President Trump and I are ready to save America. Whoever's at the top of the Democratic ticket, bring it on. With her name now possibly topping the Democratic ticket, Republicans argue her record with the Biden administration is her weakness heading into the general election.
More recently, really, she has been in charge of the border policy for the administration, and that really has been a mess from day one, and certainly impacting Massachusetts residents and communities. So we're certainly concerned about what that would represent.
Independent presidential candidate Robert Kennedy Jr. speaking from the family's compound on the Cape. He broke publicly with the party, now calling on Democrats to open up the nomination process.
I suspect they're going to do, which is to anoint Kamala Harris, a vice president who is monumentally unpopular within her own party. But they're doing it because it's the easiest way to hold on to the money, and she's the choice of the Democratic elites. And I think if they don't open up the process, that it really is going to discredit this political party, the party I grew up with.
Now, I caught up with Kennedy after the reports began to surface about West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin possibly considering challenging Kamala Harris for the Democratic presidential nomination. Kennedy saying simply, the more the better. From the Kennedy compound in Hyannis, Stephen Quinn, 7 News 19.
7 News spoke with several members of the Massachusetts congressional delegation about the president's decision, many of them lining up behind the vice president. Here's the night team's Kim Lucy.
Some members of the Massachusetts delegation have been outspoken from the start, while others have waited to see what President Biden would decide. Now that he is stepping aside, reaction is pouring in. An unprecedented announcement from President Biden, the Massachusetts delegation weighing in.
I always thought it was the right thing to do for the country, and that ultimately President Joe Biden would do the right thing for the country.
Congressman Seth Moulton, one of the first Democrats to publicly call for his mentor, President Biden, to step aside. Speaking to 7 News today, he says, while challenging, this is an opportunity for the Democratic Party.
Americans all across this country expressed a lot of frustration with both nominees. They didn't want to have Biden versus Trump again. One party has been willing to fix that, to make some tough changes.
He says he will support Vice President Kamala Harris for the nominee, but would also like to see an open convention. Massachusetts Congressman Jake Auchincloss agrees.
She has my support going forward. That's not exclusive to having an open and transparent process, though. I think Kamala Harris will earn and win this nomination.
Senator Ed Markey speaking over the phone, saying he plans to back the vice president.
I think that she is going to be an historically great candidate. I think there's a recombinant political DNA that she is going to bring to this candidacy that is going to have the Republicans back on their heels immediately.
Minority Whip Catherine Clark releasing a statement writing today's announcement embodies President Biden's steadfast courage and patriotism. At every point in his remarkable career, Joe Biden has put his country first, advancing the project of democracy and meeting the needs of the American people. Well, many conversations have been happening behind the scenes. Democratic Party members now have that monumental task of figuring out how to move forward. Lawmakers are expected back in D.C. tomorrow. In the newsroom, Kim Lucy, 7 News 19.
The president's decision to drop out wasn't entirely unexpected. What do voters in New Hampshire have to say about this? The night team's Chris Rogers is live in Nashua with more on that.
Well, New Hampshire is considered a toss-up state in the upcoming presidential election. So we got out today. We talked to voters. We wanted to get their feeling about what exactly their reaction is to a sitting U.S. president dropping out of the race. And it's safe to say the reaction was varied.
I like that because I like Trump.
Voters in New Hampshire divided.
I cried. I was really sad.
As the news broke that President Joe Biden will not be seeking re-election, those who cast their ballot in the swing state had mixed opinions.
Kind of expected it to happen one way or another, whether it be he had a medical issue one way, medical issue happen, or his party just decided, hey, we just don't want you.
Some saying they believe the move was a result of pressure from the president's own political party.
I mean, I'm not too surprised, I guess. Kind of expected to happen. I think there's a lot of pressure from the party. So, he's not getting any younger.
Others already looking at the current vice president as the party's future.
I guess right now Kamala, and I hope that they pick Pete Buttigieg for vice president.
And while some voters are ready to cast their ballot for anyone who runs against former President Donald Trump,
I like Kamala Harris.
I can't stand Trump. I think this country will be in trouble if he's elected.
Some Granite Staters feel this is a step in the right direction.
Doesn't change the way I'm voting. I've been seeing the writing on the wall for a long time. I'm just like, hey, I can't barely afford nothing, and Joe Biden hasn't really helped me in that perspective.
Now, New Hampshire has voted for a Democratic candidate in every presidential election since 2004, although historically the margin has been close. We're live in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. Chris Rogers, 7 News, 19.
And President Biden has served the nation for decades.
His career has been full of success and personal struggles, both of which have earned him the respect of his colleagues. After 5 decades in politics, President Joe Biden's political career is coming to a close. He won the highest political office, capping a career that spanned 36 years in the U.S. Senate and 8 years as vice president to Barack Obama. His inauguration came at a time of uncertainty amid the coronavirus pandemic and the January 6th Capitol attack. During his presidency, Biden spearheaded the passage of a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act.
My inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record.
Biden also ordered the final withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan, fulfilling a campaign promise to end America's longest war, and he secured support for Ukraine's war against Russia. Just as his career was starting, Biden suffered an immense personal tragedy. Soon after being elected to the Senate in 1972, his wife and 1-year-old daughter were killed in a car accident at Christmas. His sons, Beau and Hunter, were seriously hurt. In 1977, he married his second wife, Jill Jacobs. Years later, Beau died in 2015 after battling brain cancer. Biden's openness around grief became one of the defining traits of his political career. Before his inauguration in 2021, he honored his late son in Delaware.
I only have one regret. He's not here, because we should be introducing him as president.
Biden ran for president 3 times. In 1987, his first run quickly ended after he was forced to admit to committing plagiarism in law school. He also ran in 2008, but dropped out in January after finishing 5th in the Iowa caucuses. Obama chose Biden as his running mate, and they went on to win an historic victory. President Obama surprised Biden by honoring him with the Medal of Freedom before leaving office in 2017. Biden went on to win the 2020 race after more than 3 days of uncertainty. As election officials sorted through a surge of mail-in ballots because of the pandemic, he became the oldest president ever sworn in at 78. He was seen by some colleagues as a leader who tried to reach across the aisle during difficult times to find bipartisan solutions. His Democratic colleagues, reflecting on his career, including Senator Bernie Sanders, saying, Joe Biden has served our country with honor and dignity. As the first president to ever walk on a picket line with striking workers, he has been the most pro-working class president in modern American history. Thank you, Mr. President, for all you've done. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg saying it was an honor to serve under his administration, adding, Joe Biden has earned his place among the best and most consequential presidents in American history. I am so proud to serve under his leadership and thankful for his unwavering focus on what is best for our country. Today, Biden also highlighted several achievements when announcing that he would not seek re-election, including expanding health care for a record number of Americans and providing care to veterans exposed to toxic substances. And stay with the news station for continuing coverage of the president's decision to drop out. We'll have the latest on air, online, and on the 7 News app as well.
And we're following other news still to come from the night team. AJ is tracking the weather.
Yeah, gorgeous weekend for us, but it looks like some unsettled weather's on the way. I'll let you know what to expect from the weather department coming up.
Then a fiery stop to a show here at Fenway. Concert goers reacting to flames that halted last night's performance.
And a terrifying attack in a terminal. Police investigating why a stranger stabbed a woman at the Miami airport. It's all next on 7 News at 9.